Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Mother. Mother is a tense, edge-of-your-seat movie that builds and builds and gets you into it as you feel the tension going on in the house that keeps riding you and riding you throughout. This movie is also a huge bag of bullshit, but it rides both those things magnificently well. This is the kind of pretentious auteur kind of statement that we don't get enough of, I guess, if you could say that, but like no one really likes these movies usually, and they're honestly not this watchable and thought-provoking. Most of the time you're like, oh god, just go back to your normal stuff. And I'm a little like that with this, but I have to say I loved actually seeing this film. Certainly it's amazing that a mainstream studio made this film and the biggest movie star in the world was in this film, and that anyone thought that this film was, you know, competent and a good idea or anything like that. But I also sort of love that this film is so well made, actually sort of moves between all its pretentious bullshit, tries to be about people who create things and how they need all this space and how hard it is and how they're so selfish and evil, rather than actually thinking like, I need to get my life in order and there's a way you can organize your life better and be a responsible adult and still create things, but hey, I didn't make Black Swan, so what do I know? And also sort of about the Bible, but in that way that, like, you know, like English professors are like, well, if you study the Bible as a book and not as like this religious text kind of thing. I sort of love this movie, and I also never want to see it again ever in my entire life. Like, this is so pretentious that I'm not sure if he's joking or is actually that pretentious. Darren Aronofsky is able to get away with this film. If he wasn't the director he was, I mean, he barely gets away with this film. This film is nonsense. Like, I sort of love this the same reason I love the Assassin's Creed movie. That's something a lot of people are saying. In that, I'm like, wow, this like existed. This is not good, but this existed. Kudos to you, man, that you did this. I mean, I think you're gonna lose your job at that studio, but hats off, man. Whoa, that's crazy. I think this is a cinephile movie, and that's not to say like you're sitting there like, hey, I like movies, what the fuck, Jim? I'm not trying to disclude you. I'm saying like, look, if you only see a certain amount of movies a year and you want to see something different and thought-provoking and interesting, just don't. It's not like good. It is interesting, it is divisive, but it's also divisive in the way I don't think there's a wrong way to view this film. You could laugh at this film, you could say it's a ridiculous comedy. I think at parties Darren Aronofsky will say, oh yeah, it totally was a comedy, and also look at it as a major auteur statement. Anyone else who, like Nicholas Winding Refn or Terrence Malick or any of these directors who make these big auteurish statement movies that are real show-offy and aren't really that good and don't really work and most people just groan at and forget, Mother is like so the best one. But these are movies for cinephiles or completionists or people who are huge Aronofsky fans. If you've never seen a Darren Aronofsky movie before, see this one like last. I would say this is more in the Fountain vein than anything, even though at the beginning it felt like it was maybe in the vein of Black Swan meets The Fountain, but it became clear pretty quickly. It was really more into the Fountain thing and goes even crazier, I guess, but I rewatched The Fountain. I don't think I would rewatch this, but I just don't think this is for your average moviegoer. This is for the cinephile who wants to dig deep and deconstruct a film and talk about all its meanings and all that stuff. And there's some interesting things to go into with this film, particularly if you saw this movie with Rachel Weisz, who, by the way, if she wants to post a review, I think it would outdo pretty much everyone who has done a review of this film. And I'm not trying to be a celebrity gossip person, I'm just saying that's pretty easy to read into. A lot of what Darren Aronofsky's doing is kind of pointing the finger at himself. I often wonder if he's pointing the finger at himself or his various partners in life and saying, you know, that they needed all this, or he's also saying that he needed all this, or oversimplifying how his fame affected them rather than, since he tends to date other famous people, how their fame actually affected him, because, you know, as cool as Darren Aronofsky is, as much as I like to see his movies, and most people like to talk about him, I'm guessing when he's in photo lines, most people don't really care about him. I think he has an over self-importance that is so on the parody line that I feel like this is the last movie where it's like bearable. He's either going to retreat and he'll be doing a Star Wars or a Marvel movie. Okay, that's just crazy actually. When I said that, I didn't even believe that. I mean, it's like, like, remember when he's gonna do Batman? He's just, that guy's, that is never happening. I mean, he acts like it was never gonna happen. That's kind of the thing with him. He has to look like he's the coolest arty guy on the block. And I think he could have been an interesting kind of blockbuster director, and he has that kind of flow to him, how he uses his camera, how he shoots, how he has his films move. He makes very accessible, kind of beautiful, like thought-provoking, but like flow-wise, interesting art films that most directors really can't get away with. If there's a director who could really actually get a mainstream moviegoer more into art movies, it might be through him, with things like Requiem for a Dream or Pi or Black Swan or The Wrestler. And a lot of those have done actually pretty well and live on as like major classics of cinema. But Mother shows that guy's still there and he still has talent, but I don't think he's really interested in that anymore. He wants to make these broadly strange art movies. You know, he found a way to make a mainstream Hollywood studio art movie auteur statement, and that's what this really is. It's a nonsense auteur statement. He's just still sort of good at it. I think The Fountain is still his big auteur crazy movie. This one is like, we're going down the line where I'm like, okay, but Neon Demon did some of these things like the body horror, the giallo stuff, and Aronofsky's like, no, I'm gonna bring the Bible into it, and we're always gonna stay in this house, and none of the characters are gonna have names, and it's gonna be insane, and I'll get bigger stars and actually get Paramount to pay for it. I can't even really spoil this movie, because if I spoiled it, you wouldn't believe it, and it's like one of those things like Twin Peaks in a way. You can't really spoil it, because even when you see it, you're like, what the fuck? There's a surprise Kristen Wiig. It's funny because part of it, the reading, everyone says it's about like how Javier Bardem's kind of God, and when Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer show up, they're Adam and Eve, and when their kids show up, that's Cain and Abel. So hold up, this movie is about the tortured creative process and how artists are creative and selfish and have a huge ego, which is in turn supposed to be about Darren Aronofsky, but he also made this film and that character God. So you're criticizing yourself, are you? This movie's dumb, but I just love it. I don't want to see this again. It was enjoyable. It really flowed very well. It wasn't really until the end that I started to feel actually a little bored of it, but it maintained a really crazy flow as it kept escalating and escalating. I felt a tension to it. It felt very Roman Polanski, sort of reminded me of The Tenet in Rosemary's Baby and Repulsion, which I believe is like his Loose Apartment trilogy or something. It's interesting how much the work of Ira Levin has become a major influence on 2017 movies, from Get Out to this film. But I think this is more Polanski than Ira Levin, but there's a bit of Ira Levin in that the fact that Jennifer Lawrence doesn't know what's going on at all. I actually thought Jennifer Lawrence was really good in this, who I think is very talented. Amazed at how good she was in kind of this crazy art movie. She's more natural, and you know, she has such a persona and everything like that. Her versatility, I think, is probably better than we really realize or appreciate, and this really shows it. Like, she could do a David Lynch movie. Will she? Probably not. Should she? Probably not. But she could do it and do it really well. Javier Bardem is good in everything, and giving him a good review is ridiculous, but he's very good in this. I think he really gets what he's doing and plays into it so well that it makes it almost even more delicious what he's doing. Michelle Pfeiffer is just totally vamping it up, and I like seeing Michelle Pfeiffer in this. Ed Harris is fine, you know, he's a little crazy in this. It's interesting how everybody who worked on this film, even the cinematographer Matthew Labatique, really brought it with this film. Everyone's really trying to make the best crazy batshit bullshit movie that anyone could ever make. Like, they're really going towards it. They're not trying to stop themselves at all. They're not trying to hold back, and they shouldn't for a movie like this. They do the best job they can to make this nonsense movie. And I guess if I was one of those critics, I'd say, oh, it's like a fever dream, even though that's such a bad way to describe things or whatever. But it is like a crazy thing. The flow of it's weird. Sometimes it cuts randomly. It moves in such a way that you're not sure what's going on. You feel a little overwhelmed in certain places. You feel like you're missing parts. You feel like you're like, should I understand that? Did I miss someone saying something? It's like very weird, and it makes you unsure of what's going on, just like she's unsure of what's going on. I totally understand if you hate this movie. And at first I didn't like that people were laughing at this film while I was watching it, but as it went on, I go, I don't know, this is so nuts. It's just like, laugh away, man. I don't know how you're supposed to read this one. And I don't think Aronofsky does. You know, he really gave out, like, I think a poems before and after if you went to press screenings. I saw it at a normal, I never get to go to those, but that's what I read. He is that kind of a guy. This is like a senior thesis kind of an auteur statement. He's the kind of guy who will have both those things on the DVD, and then the studio will be like, well, people don't actually buy DVDs anymore. Do you know what Netflix is? And then he'll cry and make a poem about it. I actually really like Darren Aronofsky. I saw Pi in theaters, believe it or not, when it was originally released, and I've seen all his movies pretty regularly when they come out, and I am a little sad to see him go down this pretentious auteur road. I find them fascinating. I actually really enjoy them. Any of my cinephile friends, I'll say, absolutely see it. It is nonsense, but you will have an amazing time. You'll be like, holy shit, like, movies are real and amazing, and this is fucking dumb. Like, there are certain things, I talk about this a lot, I guess, is that you're just bear witness to, like, holy crap, this got made, and it's sort of like a cult movie. And I think this probably could be like a cinephile or film student cult movie, which I think Darren Aronofsky would totally love. It's not like, I think a film that probably should have that cult around it, but I can understand if people get enamored with it. I am more enamored with The Fountain and his other stuff, really, and I think The Fountain is probably the better of this film. It's like so audacious, and the special effects are crazy, and its big mission statement and everything like that. Mother is more crazy in the fact that, like, it really gets surreal and odd and crazy and strange and pushes itself in ways that you really did not expect. You're not sure when this takes place. Is this all a dream? If this is like another dimension, what exactly is going on? What's wrong with Darren Aronofsky? Like, all those questions you will have while watching Mother. I'm still shocked a mainstream audience is having to sit through this film. I'm shocked that this film got made. I sort of love that, but I don't think this is a movie for everyone at all. This is a movie for very few people, and if you are very passionate about it, hold on to this movie because no one else is going to. I think it's great that directors make auteur statements, and sometimes we can get grand movies from that. I am just like, wow. I love how the camera follows Jennifer Lawrence. I love the tension in it that reminds me of Michael Haneke and Funny Games. I love how Darren Aronofsky is just still at the peak of his powers as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. I think he's lost his fucking mind. I don't think he knows what's going on. He loves torturing women, but also saying, like, but men can be as crazy as they want, but it's sad that women have this society they have to live in. But I can be as crazy as I want to be as a man and do all these things, but it's so terrible that women have the burden of society, while I also am one of the worst examples of privilege in society and continue that going on. I don't know how to read this movie. I don't think there is a way. I don't even understand why Mother is not capitalized and has an exclamation point, and you know there's going to be a video essay in like a year, someone who watched this 10 times, which already something's wrong with that person, and they explain why the title, and that's like going to be their thesis and all this shit. I cannot wait. Link that, put that in the comments when someone makes that crap, because you know it's happening. Mother is an audacious, crazy auteur statement of a movie, and it's beautiful in that. It's beautiful in its stupidity and its ego and its bullshit. It's amazing in that. If all of that sounds enticing to you, then see this movie. But for everyone else, stay away, because this is not going to be for you. This might simultaneously be a statement about how great auteurism is, and also why studios don't really want to have any faith in it because they have to put up with a bunch of bullshit like this. Really putting up with this bullshit and how much of this bullshit you are willing to put up with is kind of the gauge of how you'll feel about this movie. I'm fine with putting up with the bullshit of this film, but I also can recognize its bullshit while still having a good time and admiring the artistry of that bullshit that Darren Aronofsky has brought to the screen. So if you have seen Mother and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.